I swam so far down and you were there. But you couldn't save me. You couldn't save me. See, around you I could never breathe anyway. Let the water rise. Let the water rise. Let the water rise on us till we say we don't need no more rain. No, we don't need no more rain. I had a dream there was a man at the bottom of the ocean, and he spoke to me. The Lord, he spoke to me. He said, boy, you can learn every hard lesson in this life, and it'll still be there just waiting to do you like you done them. Don't go, my friend. Let the water rise. Let the water rise. Oh, let the water rise on us till we say we don't need no more rain. Let the water rise. Yeah. Let the water rise. Oh, let the water rise on us till we say we don't need no more rain. No, we don't need no more rain. No, we don't need no more rain. Thanks.
Thanks so much. We always enjoy having you, Ryan, even when there are technical difficulties.
Yeah.
All right. Our main speaker today is Cheryl Dorsey. Cheryl is a LA native and joined the LAPD in 1980. During her career, she worked exclusively in patrol and specialized units in all 4 bureaus within the city of Los Angeles. That's South, Central, West, and Valley for those of us who are unfamiliar with that, the bureaus. In addition to various patrol divisions assignments, Sergeant Dorsey was assigned to the infamous gang unit in Operations South Bureau known as Community Resources Against Street Hoodlums, or C.R.A.S.H, under the command of Police Chief Daryl F. She's also written an autobiography, Black and Blue, The Creation of a Social Advocate, which provides an unfiltered look into the LAPD police culture. She provides insight and techniques to de-escalate tensions during police encounters with a level of credibility that is effective, relevant, and irrefutable. So please welcome to this screen, Cheryl Dorsey.
Hi, thank you. 2 things I know. Silence is agreement, and you can't change what you tolerate. With 18 years on the Los Angeles Police Department, I went to that so-called safe space that had been created on the Los Angeles Police Department, the Ombudsman's office, to report sexual harassment by my command staff officer. I reported in this safe place, and I was told to go back to my division of assignment after having requested an administrative transfer out of that unit into another unit where I felt I would be better protected and safe, if you will, for my remaining 2 years on the department. But in the time that it took me to drive the 2 miles back to my division of assignment, my command staff officers, both of them, a Captain 1 and a Captain 3, knew that I had been to the safe spot. So much for safe zones. I say this because I think that if police chiefs who understand police culture, retaliation, created safe zones where good officers could report on bad officers. We hear a lot about the responsibility or the onus of a partner officer to report bad deeds or to intervene with misconduct being committed in their presence. And I know personally that when you come forward, there's a price to pay, and that's why many officers don't. I know that police chiefs could stop this yesterday if they really had an appetite to do that by just creating for real safe places and accountability for errant officers. And so we have seen examples of this kind of behavior occurring again and again across the nation, most recently in the incident of George Floyd, who was murdered by a police officer, Derek Chauvin, who had over 18 different personnel complaints. I would guess to say that if that department had done their job at complaint 6, 7, 10, 12, perhaps Mr. George Floyd would still be here today. The officer who was involved in the murder of Rayshard Brooks in Atlanta, Garrett Wolf, had also been involved in over a dozen personnel complaints. And so while we hear talk of on a national level creating a registry, a database where we can keep track of these officers, I think they're being a little disingenuous with us, because it's not like these police departments don't already know who the errant officers are, be they rank and file or be they command staff. They know who these officers are, but for whatever reason, police chiefs, sheriffs, and commissioners don't want to hold these officers accountable, and therefore they live to offend again. And so while we know that this goes on and there are examples of it, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about what's wrong, because I'm all about let's fix it. What does accountability look like? To bring this closer to home, I know that you guys there in Houston have had your own issues that have made, if not national news, certainly been talked about in the local newspapers there regularly, with regards to about 6 police officers on the Houston Police Department who were involved in infamous no-knock warrants, right? We know that no-knock warrants are problematic. We saw that in the case of Breonna Taylor, where officers lied to justify a no-knock warrant. Officers were judge shopping. In other words, they went to judges that they thought were friendly or maybe wouldn't pay attention to detail, wouldn't give the circumstances of the affidavit that was presented to them much of a look over, if you will, and were allowed then to get these. Hold on one second, I'm sorry. My computer is about to turn off. Sorry about that, didn't realize I wasn't plugged in. But these officers were allowed to secure these no-knock search warrants by giving information that wasn't accurate, and the judges weren't really providing the proper oversight. So we know what's going on. We know that these are not one-offs. This is not the first time that an officer does it, whether it's a use of force, whether it's a deadly use of force, or whether it's lying on an affidavit to get a no-knock warrant. And we've seen the fatal consequences of officers who do that, who lie in pursuit of getting a judge to sign off on a no-knock warrant there in Houston. It was the Tuttles, Regina, see, what's her name? Regina Nicholas and Dennis Tuttle were killed when a couple of officers obtained a no-knock search warrant and ultimately entered into the residence and shot and killed the couple as well as their dog fatally. And now we know, because of reports in the news, that the officers lied. The one main offender, his name is Goins, Detective Goins, and his partner, I believe, is Officer Bryant. And we now know, as a result of an audit, now I'm sure that there was information available somewhere out there that these officers had been involved in questionable activity, but either they looked the other way because, I don't know why, civil liability that could come down the road if someone were to publicly say the things that they're forced to say now publicly, that officers were lying about information that they received from confidential informants in pursuit of, it's reported, over 231 investigations there in Houston, by this Detective Goins. 231 investigations, and they found in their audit of Detective Goins' investigations over 400 errors. In other words, sounds to me like 400 different instances when this officer had lied. There's also, I know personally, a female sergeant by the name of Kathy Swilley there from the Houston Police Department who talked about these errant officers, who talked about officers who fabricate and manufacture reasons not only for no-knock warrants, but in pursuit of other events, other circumstances, if you will, one of which ultimately led to her termination. And so, as a whistleblower, Kathy Swiley has been trying to bring attention not only to her case, but also to others who have suffered a similar circumstance. And so, for whatever reason, we have police departments who don't want to get involved and get engaged. And so that's where you, the community, come in. Because if you understand that these things are going on, and if you speak their lingo, and that's part and parcel as to why I do what I do, I speak publicly because what happens when regular citizens speak out, generally I've seen on news conferences, police chiefs say, well, you don't know what it is to be a police officer. You never wore the uniform and it's a tough job and we have to make split-second decisions. And, there was something that happened on the video a few minutes earlier that you didn't see. And if you knew what I knew, somehow you would think and feel differently about what we're seeing happen on a national level. And so I kind of had an aha moment back in 2013 because I realized everything that I had gone through on the Los Angeles Police Department, I had gone through so that I could come to you and speak credibly about the kinds of things that occur, speak to you about police culture, because if you've never been on the other side of that blue line, it's very difficult to understand how and why these things are allowed to happen. And a lot of it has to do with the culture. A lot of it is because it's systemic, it's top down. You understand that every police chief was once a police officer. And so when I see them on television clutching their pearls and acting surprised about things that they can no longer pretend exist, I find it to be intellectually dishonest, because every police chief was once a police officer, and they've grown up, if not on that department, in another system where these things go on time and time again, and they're overlooked, they're minimized and mitigated. Officers live to offend again. So what do? How do we fix it? What does accountability really look like? Because that's what I hear from families who've lost loved ones, is they want someone to be held accountable. We're hearing that now on a national level with regards to everything that folks who are up for elections in a few months talk about wanting as well, accountability. And so it's very difficult, in my opinion, to speak to what that accountability really should be if you've never been on the other side of that blue line, if you will. And so for me, when I think about accountability, well, first of all, I think we need to hold officers personally accountable. And if you're not familiar with the term qualified immunity, you should become aware and know what that is. Do your homework. You can Google it. The internet is an amazing place. There's all sorts of information out there that's available that will help you so that you better understand what qualified immunity is. And basically what that does is it provides shelter and cover for officers who are committing police misconduct, or in some cases violating the law. And so if an officer is not held personally accountable, as in the case of Derek Chauvin or Garrett Raw or Daniel Pantaleo, who choked Eric Garner to death because that wasn't his first offense. New York Police Department in that city had paid out millions of dollars because of Daniel Pantaleo's excessive uses of force over the years. And so if you don't do anything to deter the bad behavior, how do you stop it? What does an officer learn? There's also a lot being talked about nationally with regards to police reform in terms of decertifying police officers. And I think that that's a good first step, because understand we didn't get here overnight, and there's not one thing that's going to fix this problem. It's multifaceted, and it's important that you understand what all those different angles look like, so that when you do have an opportunity to attend a community meeting or have a conversation with a police chief or police command staff officer, maybe even just the officer that patrols your neighborhood, you can ask them about officer accountability, about safe zones and whistleblower protection, because while whistleblower protection is a word that we've come to know, given all that's going on right now in this current administration, you see what happens to whistleblowers at that level when they've come forward and told about malfeasance, about wrongdoing. And so you understand, if it can happen to Lieutenant Colonel Vindman and everyone else who has suffered because they spoke out, you understand how very easily an officer can be retaliated against by a sergeant, a watch commander, and or a chief of police if they speak out against an officer which may lead to civil liability somewhere down the road for that agency. And so there needs to be accountability. There needs to be an inability for officers who do violate police procedures, who may commit law violations, not be able to just resign, not to be able to get that gift of resignation and then move on to another police department because there's really no record designed. And listen, we have due process that we are afforded, and so sometimes when an officer knows that termination is coming, they can get down to the personnel division and resign before they are terminated, and then guess what? They move on to another police department. And so now, if this legislation is being talked about and bantered back and forth with regards to decertification, we have some legislation here in California that is being put forth, and I would encourage you to find out if there's something similar, and if not, get something similar started to decertify a police officer. And what that does is that removes our certification. Much like you need a driver's license to drive a car, police officers need a certification in order to be a peace officer. And so if you lose that certification because of malfeasance, wrongdoing, police misconduct on one agency, you can't quickly resign and then go apply for another police department and then be picked up because you've already gone through the process and you have that certification that you can take from one department to another. So that's part of what we can do as a community to fix this problem. And then the other thing that I encourage people to do is I encourage you to join. If you have folks who who may be in school taking courses that have something to do with criminal justice or just have an interest in law enforcement, I encourage anyone, if you want to be part of the solution, then get on that police department. If you don't like the way police officers are treating folks in your community, you need to join, because I believe that part of that change is going to come from the inside. And I know that it's possible to have a small role to play, as I did for the 20 years that I wore a Los Angeles Police Department uniform. I know that there were times when officers may have been inclined to be involved in some shenanigans and didn't, because I was there and because they weren't really sure if I was part of that culture, part of that blue code of silence situation that exists on police departments. And so on that day, because they're with me and not their regular partner, if they had a propensity to get involved in something that could get them or me in trouble, it didn't occur. And so I believe if there had been someone like me who was with Aaron Dean when he was standing outside of the window of a Tatiana Jefferson, and she was inside with her had been someone who had the intestinal fortitude to tell him to put your gun up. What are you doing? This is not that kind of a call. It's a welfare check. Perhaps the Tatiana Jefferson would have been alive if one of those 4 officers with Derek Chauvin, the other 3 beside Derek Chauvin, had the intestinal fortitude to just pull him by the collar before he got to 8 minutes and 46 seconds of just sitting and applying pressure to George Floyd's neck. Perhaps he would be here. And so that's just another one of the many prongs that we need to employ, if you will, if we really want to be about that change. And then we have to get involved in terms of not avoiding jury summons. I know that I'm certainly guilty of it over the years. They seem to come at an inopportune time. And so we have to be on juries. We have to be there because we've seen that great deference is given to a police officer's version of events. And I often say that, when a police officer uses deadly force as a first resort rather than a last resort, as we are trained and taught, when we go before a jury, jurors have a very hard time of not believing what it is that we say, because we've been taught and it's been drilled into us that, this is a difficult job, and it is. That officers have to make split-second decisions, and we do. And that's why we receive an inordinate amount of training. And I also understand that everyone who wants to be the police shouldn't be the police. And I think there's no harm in admitting that there are some that are doing this job who maybe don't have the right skill set and temperament. And so when that happens, and when they wind up taking a life in an instance when they should not have, and they sit before a jury, it's important for folks who understand that great deference is given, but not everything that an officer always says is true and can be taken as gospel. We need you on those juries. And then, of course, lastly, and then I'll stop, is vote. This is an election year, and every police chief serves at the pleasure of an elected mayor or an elected or appointed city manager who might be serving at the pleasure of an elected city council, right? We know that politicians understand one thing, and that's votes. And so it's very important to pay attention not only to this very important thing that's about to happen in November, which is the President of the United States, but also those down ballot issues, because I think all politics is local. And so police chiefs serve at the pleasure of elected mayors, district attorneys who don't seem to have an appetite all the time to prosecute errant officers are elected officials. And of course, sheriffs are elected officials. And so we have a role to play. We can't just sit on the sidelines and complain about the things that are wrong, and there are many. We have to also get engaged and get involved. And so having said all of that, let me thank you for allowing me to come before you and just speak my truth. And I will answer any questions that you have, because I want to hear from you and I want to know what keeps you up at night.
Well, thank you so much, Sergeant Dorsey. Is it like with the military where you still retain your sergeant's title after you retire, or?
Yes, LAPD is quasi-military. At least it was. That's kind of always been the mindset. And so I do, because I'm a public figure, I do refer to myself as Sergeant Dorsey, because I want people to know when I say a thing, it's not just Cheryl that's talking to you. I'm talking to you as a professional and someone who knows a thing or two about a thing or two.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it. Before we go into Q&A, we are going to do breakout sessions. This gives everyone kind of a chance to either go to the bathroom, refill your coffee, and kind of come up with some questions, or just say hi to people you haven't been able to see in a while. So with that, we're going to take about a 5-7 minute break. Give people a chance to kind of talk and think of some questions, and then we'll come back and get on with the Q&A after that.
Real safe zone. Not that, they'll say, oh no, we have whistleblower. And I know that we have whistleblower. I had this conversation with the chief of police here in Los Angeles because I called him out on a radio station. And I said, well, with all due respect, sir, I know we have, safe zones. I went to it. And before I could get back, they already knew. And so while they exist, real protection doesn't.
Great, thank you, Will. We have another question. If we were to legalize, all drugs, not just weed, but crack, cocaine, heroin, etc., for adults 21 and over, and treat it like prostitution is treated in certain counties in Nevada, how much of a difference do you think that would make for the relationship between the police and minority communities?
Well, that's that kind of sounds like you think that everybody in minority communities is using drugs. So I don't know what you're asking me. I'm a police officer, so I don't support anything that is detrimental. And I think certain drugs are detrimental. I think some of them are gateway that lead to other drugs that are very addictive, that will cause you to get involved in criminality because now you need to feed this habit. And so I can't support that.
Right. Okay. And I guess a better way to phrase that particular question would be, how much do you think that would make a difference between police and just the police brutality? Because a lot of times, especially like a weed traffic stop can turn into something more. But
anytime you have officers who, and listen, let me just say that the ones that are cutting up, I think, are in the minority. I don't believe that there are police officers wholesale who get up every day coming to work wanting to misuse people, wanting to kill folks. So I think they're in the minority. But there are certainly opportunities for officers to get involved in what we call pretext stops, something that is, yes, it's legal, but is it a little CS? Yeah, broken tail light, air freshener hanging from your rear view mirror. Those are all legal reasons to stop someone. And certainly here in Los Angeles, we're California specifically, we're right now dealing with the issue of the ban on menthol tobacco products here in California, specifically LA. This is something that is going on across the nation. You might want to look into it there, because if they ban menthol tobacco products in Houston, 85% of the folks who use menthol tobacco are Black. 50% of Hispanics smoke menthol products. They're not looking to ban all tobacco, just menthol. And so that gives officers an opportunity to engage people of color. And when you stop a young millennial because he left home with a pack of Newport cigarettes and tell him, that's why I stopped you, I want to know where you got them from because you can't possess them legally, a young millennial is not going to believe that that's a real thing. And then there's going to be that thing that officers talk about where they weren't complying, they were asking too many questions, and then the officer puts hands on them. Once the officer puts hands on you, they can't leave you. They got to arrest you for something. So they manufacture a reason to put you into the system. And you can see how this just leads to a whole nother situation. Either you're going to be a criminal now with a record, or you're going to be dead, a la Eric Garner.
Unfortunately, the Houston area is familiar with a situation like that happened in a nearby area. But I do want to keep moving on to some other questions. And one question we have is, police unions have often played a role in keeping an officer who's committed misconduct from losing their job. Is there anything that we can do to demand that police unions stop protecting errant cops?
I think one of the things that should stop is that police unions should not be allowed to pay millions of dollars to politicians. A police union is not the same kind of setup that you think of in other unions like plumbers and pipe fitters and all of that. It's just a lobbying arm of the police department. And here in Los Angeles, our police union, the Los Angeles Police Protective League, specifically has paid millions of dollars to a district attorney who's up for re-election. Why? Because she won't prosecute a police officer. She's not seen a shooting or use of force by an LAPD officer that doesn't excite her. And so you understand why our union supports her and has paid over $2 million into her campaign. I think that should not be allowed. It seems to me like a conflict of interest. So that would be a conversation that you would want to have with police chiefs who are not generally part of the police officers' unions. Hey, chief, what are you doing to make sure that your unions aren't supporting politicians who are going to look the other way when we ask for legislation that might put you in check?
Next question. What is your take on police body cams and the effect that they have on public perception? And especially in the case of George Floyd, there was a video. Breonna Taylor, there wasn't a video. And how her officers have remained free and practically unknown.
I think police body cams, vehicle dash cams are good, but you see that they really make no difference because police officers are savvy. Some of us know to turn them off or unscrew an antenna. And if I unscrew my antenna and it doesn't engage, I mean, how do you prove that I did it on purpose? It was just an accident. I mean, yikes. Or I didn't activate it until after the shooting occurred, so you don't see everything that led up to it and the actual shooting. My bad. So again, accountability. I think it's important, but even when we see what we see, they tell us you can't believe your lying eyes. And so let me narrate for you and tell you what you really saw. So again, accountability, holding officers accountable and requiring them to articulate why they used the kind of force that they did. The way I was taught and trained, we have to articulate every bullet that we fire from our weapon. If someone is scaring me, causing me to fear for my safety, and I fire 2 rounds in rapid succession as I'm taught and trained, and the person goes down, why am I still shooting 16 more rounds? I've got to articulate that. And if I can't articulate it in a way that it makes sense, then that's a problem, and they should be held accountable.
And this next question kind of pretty much dovetails with that question. you say you have to articulate, every bullet that you fire. But this question comes from a me who reads a lot of reports, or incident reports for her work, and a lot of times they're free form, or it's not complete or clear as to what exactly happened. Do you have any recommendations to when it comes to those written incident reports?
Well, you just have to ask the proper follow-up questions, and so that's why I do what I do. If you've ever seen me on any of the local or international news networks talking about these police shootings, I try to say the words so that others will hear me and know what to ask about. Because again, if an officer just blanket says, "I was in fear for my safety," and you let that go, then there's no real requirement for them to explain more. Again, a recent conversation that I had on a news radio program with my police chief. Now, my police chief had spoken earlier, and alone, nobody was there. And one of the things that he said is the reason that LAPD only has 9% of its police force of black officers, 9% on the LAPD, there's about 10,000 total, is because he can't find any eligible blacks to recruit. And my response was, well, that's easy for him to say when there's nobody to challenge him, because in the next hour when I was on and I looked in the camera and said, "Sir, let me help you recruit black folks. Are you going to the HBCUs where kids are studying criminal justice and have an interest and a desire to become police officers? Where are you looking? What does your recruitment look like?" And so it's easy to say, I tried to recruit, I just can't find black folks. Or I tried to get this person to comply and they refused, like we heard with George Floyd. He wasn't compliant. The man was in handcuffs. Once the handcuffs went on, game over. And so if you don't ask those follow-up questions, if you don't hold their feet to the fire, then they get away with just making a blanket statement, and that stands.
Next question comes from Bob. Theoretically, Congress is the directs the military. Would it be possible to have a subcommittee formed at the city council level or the local level to direct the local police force? That would could that be what allows a safe space in the direct prosecutors for police discipline?
Well, I would imagine anything is possible if you ask for it. I mean, a lot of places have independent civilian review boards. We do here in Los Angeles. Los Angeles Police Commission, NYPD has the Civilian Review Board, and so there are places that do have others who oversee and look at. The problem I have with these independent review boards is that they don't have teeth, because most people don't understand at the end of the day, the police chief has a tremendous autonomy. That's their fiefdom. They do what they want, and while we have an independent civilian review board, our police commission has found fault with officers who've engaged in deadly use of force, and they told our police chief, Charlie Beck, back in 2014 in the fatal murder of Ezell Ford, that the shooting was out of policy, and Chief Charlie Beck said, "Thank you, okay." And then he did nothing. Those officers are still on the department. He did do something. He went to the top level of the administration building and recorded a message to the LAPD officers and said, "I support you." So it's important to have it. It's helpful. It would be nice if they had teeth, because who controls a police chief? Nobody.
That's rather unfortunate, really. Kind of along those same lines, we've obviously talked about review boards, but are there any templates around the U.S. of how to do police departments right?
I think there are some. I like I said, there are progressive police chiefs. I on some level, LAPD, does some things really well, other things not so much. The Seattle Police Department seems to be very progressive and is doing things that seem to be different than what we're accustomed to in terms of turning the tide, if you will, between community and police relations over there based on some things that have occurred. And so it's possible. It's just a matter of whether or not you have a police chief who has the appetite to go against the tide.
Okay. And then next question. In education, the teacher is expected to be the adult while dealing with the children, regardless of whether the child is escalating the situation aggressively. And if the educator responds with aggression, it's their job on the line. Um, are there any training models where the police officer is expected to be the adult and the responsible party in the confrontation?
I believe that that's how I was trained. Now I know every department is not, of course, I think LAPD training is the best out there. That's how I was trained. We're the professionals. We're held to a higher standard. I think what happens is that you get folks on the department who may not have the right temperament. Certainly, there are officers who are placed in schools as school resource officers who probably should not be because they don't react well to children. Much like you might have an officer who's in patrol who doesn't relate well to a community. And so I think that's why it's so important that police officers be reevaluated psychologically. I'll just say every 2 years, because you can come on well intentioned. You can work with a partner who sidesteps policy and procedure and convinces you that somehow this makes sense because don't worry about what you were taught in the academy. I'm going to show you how it's done out here in the streets. Or you just get engaged in violations of policy and misconduct, and you see that nobody's really looking, then you just push the envelope a little bit more, and then before you know it, you've got something that's made national news, and now everybody's clutching their pearls and acting like this is the first time.
All right, I know we're starting to run low on time, but we are getting a lot of questions here. So I want to try to get as many questions as possible because this is a great topic, and I'm personally enjoying this conversation and this talk today. But one question is, in countries that have more of a benevolent police force, the actual peace officer, I'm assuming, is kind of what they're getting at, as opposed to a lot of what's going on in the U.S. today. The pay is reflected in the professionalism that the country expects them to be, but in return they also require higher degrees and a lot more extensive training on how to interact with citizens. Do you see higher expectations for pay and education as being an answer to some of our police culture problems?
I think higher pay would be helpful. I don't know if that's going to change the mindset of someone who comes on a police department with implicit bias. You can't untrain racism, and you can't unpay. You can't overpay it out, right? I don't care how much money you pay someone. If they come to a position, and they don't like a certain community, then they don't like them. If they can't relate to that community, you can't make them. And so that's why evaluations are important. And I saw someone type about, police officers and mental evaluations. And we only take a psych when we first come on. At least that's the way it was on LAPD. And I think it's that way everything. I don't know if it's a cost saving issue, because again, what are you saving if you have an officer on a department who's engaged in things that are costing the city millions of dollars in settlements? But police officers are only evaluated psychologically when they are hired, and never again, unless you're involved in a fatal shooting, and then they just want to be able to say, well, we talked to them and they're in a good headspace. But what about the officers who are going through something day to day, because we're exposed to stuff that will taint you and twist you if you're not careful, and for whatever reason, officers don't self-report. It's not sexy. You get ribbed and teased by your peers. And I know this to be true because I was at the scene of a jumper. And at the end of this, the guy jumped, and I was like, oh my God. We spent 30 minutes talking to him. I was a sergeant. I went back to the station and told my watch commander, let's have BSS come down here in case anybody wants to talk. I know I wanted to talk after seeing this guy jump off a building. And all my male subordinates, when they got to the station and I said, hey, BSS is here if anybody wants to talk. And everybody was like, Sarge, I'm good. What's the problem? And I'm like, really? Because I know I'm messed up. And I was the only one who wanted to talk. So officers won't self-report. They have to be compelled. And it's only in that compelling them that maybe if you crack their head open and see it's not working right, you'll run across the Derek Chauvins and the Garrett Rolfs and the Daniel Pantaleos and everybody else whose name.
Awesome, thank you. I think that will probably be our last question, so we don't take up everyone's time. But would you actually? So there are mental health services and evaluations for police officers. The problem is just they're not wanting to take advantage of those.
They won't, because listen, if you say the wrong thing, they'll take your gun. If you don't have a gun, you can't be a cop, right? But that's why we know that officers struggle. We're no different than anybody else. That's why the divorce rate is high. That's why alcoholism is a problem. And that's why suicide is a problem. And you don't hear much being said about the number of officers who commit suicide because of a variety of issues. Why? Because that's not sexy to report either. And so they don't tell you that officers are killing themselves to the extent that they are. And that's why so many do continue to kill themselves.
It's very unfortunate. But again, really want to say thank you, and we appreciate you being here today and having this conversation with us. But I do think that is all the time we have for Q&A. I don't know if you want to stick around after our final song and just have kind of an informal chat with anyone, or if you've got to get going.
Yeah, what I would like to do just real quickly is just talk about my book, and if I can just share
absolutely.
it with you, because I have an autobiography, Black and Blue, The Creation of a Social Advocate. In this book, I talk about the things that we talked about here, what you can do, what you can suggest to family members, how you survive police encounters. My book is available on my website, SGT, the abbreviation for Sergeant, sgtcheryldorsey.com. I'll send you a signed copy, or you can just purchase a garden variety at Amazon. But it's Black and Blue, Creation of a Social Advocate. And if anyone else wants to continue, or you have a question, you can email me, or you can visit my website and send me an email there as well. My email address is sgtcheryldorsey@gmail.com. So I welcome anyone who wants to ask me something, or if something comes up later down the road and you just want to know, hey, what do you think about it? Reach out to me. I'm available. And thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate this opportunity to just come and talk to you in a real and candid way.
Well, thank you for being here. We definitely appreciate you being here today. All right. Before we have one final song from Ryan Adam Wells, we are going to post the link to donate and sign up for our weekly newsletter in the chat window. While we're no longer meeting in person, we're still paying the musicians and speakers and still have some fixed expense. Like I said at the top of the talk, one of them is our new website. Please go check it out. We're really excited about it. And we are also sponsoring a scholarship for Secular Student Alliance. You need to sign up if you know a student in your life, or you know someone who has a college student. The deadline to apply is August 31st, so just a little bit over a week to go sign up for that. We're excited to sponsor that this year. And so if you like what we're doing and you're able, please consider donating. And with that, we will have one final song from Ryan Adam Wells.
Okay. Hey, thank you so much. Thanks, Oasis, for bringing me. And also thank you, Sergeant Dorsey, for that talk. That was fascinating and very enlightening. Again, my name is Ryan Adam Wells. You can find me on every streaming service and every online thing just with those three names. I'm everywhere. So please look me up. This is a song I wrote recently called Superhuman. And just gonna go into it. When it all gets too much, you can't find your light, you can't lift your head, your arms up to fight, feels like the world doesn't want you, you can't find a home, and no matter who's with you, you're always alone. When that unwelcome darkness is always around, and the noise in your head threatens to take you down. Scream building from deep in your lungs. Take a breath, the breath always comes. And say, I am not broken. I am not broken. I am not broken, no, no. I am superhuman. Every hero has villains, and a weakness or two. and a pain that they carry through all that they do. And every villain has heroes who push them towards the light, and they inch ever closer with every lost fight. And the nightmares and terrors of this modern age may hover above us as we start to wake. So we'll scream to the gods of the air, or whatever's up there. They bend us, but we'll never break. Because I am not broken. I am not broken. I am not broken. No, no. I am superhuman. Oh, hatred and fear and anxiety will turn to dust with a clap of our hands. We can build a world of unity where love is the law of the land. Because we are not broken. We are not broken. We are not broken. No, no. Oh no, oh no. We are not broken. We are not broken. We are not broken. No, no. We are superhuman. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Special thank you to Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey and Ryan Adam Wells for being here today. Thank you to everyone joining us here in Zoom and on Facebook Live, and I think the one person on YouTube as well. Be sure and join us tonight for another Corona Conversation, 8 p.m. with Dr. Richard Andrews and Will Judy. And we